Welcome to the Travel Massive podcast.
Hi, this is Kevin O'Shaughnessy from the Dublin Travel Massive team. This is a special edition of the Travel Massive podcast. Here we're going to hear about 101 new projects which surfaced on the Travel Massive platform in 2023. So last year, during the summer, Ian and Maria from the team prepared this list, and the list comes in at around 12 different categories, some of which were quite unexpected for me. They are accessible travel, community apps for nomads, co-living, slow travel, growth in Africa, affiliate marketing, travel tech, gamification, AI and trip planning, amazing mapping applications, micronations, and finally, the big one is impact travel. You'll find the full list in the show notes and over on travelmassive.com. I got together with fellow Travel Massive podcaster Rick Kazarian and Ian himself last summer to share some notes on this. And I'll start with Ian giving a little context for the project here.
Sure. So this list came about because I was speak at Bensko Nomad Festival. They said, okay, come and give a keynote on trends in travel. And I sort of racked my brain with what we could talk about because, you know, Travel Massive is kind of a fire hose of all of the different projects and things that people are kind of creating in travel. So Maria, who works with me at Travel Massive, and me, we sat down for about a day and we started looking at projects that people had published on Travel Massive over the past year. And we started to kind of put them into themes, I guess. Out of that sort of process of looking at hundreds of projects which have been published on Travel Massive, we kind of came down to this list of core themes and we started to put projects into it. So that's sort of, I guess, a bit of a rough sketch of how we originally built this list. But I think what is interesting about this is that we kind of looked outside the bubble of the, you know, tourism industry and some, I think, pretty interesting trends the way people are kind of creating things in tourism.
It's not the usual yada yada. So we've got 12 categories. We're going to do a little highlight from each of these categories as we go through the list here, but we're not going to have time for the 100 odd projects that you've surfaced. Travel Massive has changed. If you haven't been following along, we have a new platform. There's the ability to capture and surface new projects within the travel space. So maybe 10 years before they become the next kayak.com, you will probably hear about them here first. It's a way of surfacing either new product features or new products altogether, or even new startups. So there's a lot of kind of grassroots stuff here. And that's what struck me about the list you put together. Very, very different. And the first thing on the list is accessible travel. You know, something it's almost refreshingly overdue, but it's refreshingly welcome to see that. We've got everything from co-living, mapping, which I'm going to love talking about, gamification. There's a lot of different areas here. Did you intentionally try and go for completely offbeat areas to cover, or was this just something that you found naturally coming up? There's a lot happening in Africa. There's a lot happening in micronations. How did these categories come about?
Yeah, I think these categories came about because you start to see patterns when you're at the receiving end of so many different projects in tourism, and you know, you're sort of seeing something thinking, hang on, I saw that a few weeks ago, but it was a different project. You know, you can start to see people building things in similar ways or around particular themes. So to me, it felt natural. The list is about showcasing innovation that is happening in travel, you know, and there are a lot of really brave people out there creating all kinds of cool things in travel that a lot of people might not have heard about. And the point of this list is to showcase that, to shine a light on it.
Look, we'll get stuck in because I'd like to hear each of your catches from all of these topic areas. The first one that's on the list here for me is the year of accessible travel. What you found here is 10 projects that talk about accessibility, both from a mobility standpoint, but also from the perspective of psychological or neurodivergency. Can you talk about your favorite in this list, Ian, and then over to yourself, Rick, to see what you found.
Sure. I've always been curious about this space. There are members in Travel Massive that I know have accessibility challenges, or they might be traveling in a wheelchair. We have some members who are blind. I've always been interested in how do they travel, and to understand the size of this industry. 1 in 5 people in the world have some form of disability, and so this is a huge opportunity in travel if you're just thinking about the numbers, right? How do you make a hotel room accessible to someone that is in a wheelchair? How can people travel through airports if they have a hidden disability? Someone might have a heart problem. They look like they don't have a disability that they might. So I really think that this is a really important thing for the tourism industry to sort of focus on. And it's not just about stereotypical disabilities, as you mentioned. So I'd say my pick of these listed projects, they're all really good. I got to meet a lot of them. Given that I'm Australian, I would recommend to check out Get Aboutable, founded by an incredible founder, Yasmin Gray. She's got a great team around her doing lots of really good things, and you can check them out on Travel Massive and, of course, visit them on their website to learn more. Rick?
I mean, I almost just want to echo your comments. I mean, this is such a tremendous marketplace, right? I mean, 20% of people on Earth have some sort of significant disability. So if you're in the tourism space and you're looking to carve a path for your organization, for your company, whether it's from a capitalistic standpoint or an altruistic outlook, I mean, this market has so much potential. Just looking like Wheel the World, the first one located there, I mean, they are focusing on people with disabilities. They focus and travel to or provide services in 160 destinations. So they're doing good things. And just a personal anecdote of my friend who I interviewed on my podcast, Renee Bruns. She's traveling in a wheelchair. She's been to over 130 countries. She was sharing a story with me. I think it was in Vanuatu, small island in the Pacific. And she checks into her hotel. Her room is on the second floor. There's no elevator. So she is literally going backwards on her butt, dragging her 15-kilogram wheelchair up to the second floor. So imagine the challenges that we simply don't face every single day, and these people with the disabilities have to deal with. Great opportunity for the industry to start focusing on 20% of the people out there.
It's better for the entire business, I think, when, something that might register as a complete blocker for somebody, if you cater to that, it might be a giant frustration to somebody else that wouldn't count themselves in 1 in 5. So you're making it generally better for a lot of folks.
I just add one last thing, which is Tabby Folk, which is one of the companies here. They have a really good online forum for people with accessibility needs.
Moving on, the digital nomad is a new emerging category, or a newly defined category of something that's always maybe been there. I love some of these apps. Do you want to tell me about your first pick, Rick? We'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to choose Nomadigo, and I had the opportunity to speak with one of the founders, Ben. But yeah, I think one of these great challenges of nomadic people, digital nomads, they're constantly and obviously on the move all the time, setting up new community here and there. And while you still have this great community of people that you're connected to, how do you stay in touch with them? And Ben and his team with their app is working on a solution for this. And basically the concept is being able to alert and notify your community, your friends, your circle where you are. So this is a great way to connect, stay in touch, and keep and build those relationships.
Yeah, I think to understand why are there suddenly all these digital nomads, there's a lot of theories. I mean, I think one is lockdowns made people leave cities. People were like, screw this, I'm not going to hang around a lockdown, I'm going to Mexico. There's also an element of housing prices are just so expensive for a lot of people these days that they just think, I'm never going to have an opportunity to buy a house, so screw it, I'm going to travel. So there's a few dynamics playing in there. Plus, I think obviously the fact that people are working out that they can work remotely. And I think the important thing here is that this sense of community, and how do you build community by being a nomad? Because of course, nomads travel, they're going to leave a city at some point and go somewhere else. And how do you build connections with people? So it's really interesting to see these apps around this space.
A shout out to John Lee, who submitted the digital nomad visas portion here. Part of recruitment and part of working through a company like remote.com is that you do have the ability to hire somebody that's working remotely. But for the candidate themselves, for the applicant, there's the tax implications and the I wonder if, and tools like what we see here. And John's there help us understand the possibilities, the potential, and removing some of those barriers to make it easier to ideate and therefore to start the process of a travel project for somebody. So co-living. Okay, you've got me on this one, Ian. I wasn't expecting this. I love the title, but I know nothing about it. Can you start from scratch, please, and talk about what co-living means and why it's here?
Okay, digital nomads are probably originally just used Airbnb and hung out, and then they were like, well, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could also, we're working together, why don't we live together? So I think if you have a look at Outsight, they've been around for quite some time. What they do, they take a very large property, and effectively it's a share house for professionals. You're sharing the kitchen and you're sharing some working spaces, but you would have your own bedroom place to stay. So to me, it feels a bit like hostel life, kind of, but for people who are a little bit older and being a bit more focused on their business. But we've seen interesting projects like Montenegro Tower. So a guy just took over an abandoned building and has renovated into a co-living, co-working space. So you're seeing buildings that are not utilized being turned into co-living. So I think it's a fascinating concept. Just to add also, they're not on the list, but a company called Selena is also launching a lot of sites around the world with this co-living concept.
Rick, what's the standout for you?
Well, I wasn't personally familiar with any of them, but I took a quick cruise and looked around. And I also wanted to hire Montenegro Tower. I've been to Montenegro, but I haven't been to the coast. It's supposed to be absolutely stunning. The description had me at a 18th century stone ruin from the Ottoman Empire and only a kilometer or two from the beach. So if I'm going to be focusing on my business, working with the community, that sounds like a great opportunity and place to stay, work, and relax.
It's great that we have this moment in time list where things like these are emerging, upcycling ruins, or just different ways of thinking about the lifestyle of being abroad. It's great to see this coming through. This is another topic that came for me through Travel Massive. I would have never heard the two terms put together unless Travel Massive did it for me. I've heard it elsewhere by now, but the term slow travel, it's not something that I would have found maybe through Focuswire or Skift or any of the other channels until now, but slow travel during 2022-23 on tours and these brands came to the fore. It's great to see this as a category. Rick, do you want to start on this one? I'm drawn automatically to the map here for Chrono Trains. I'd love to talk about that in a sec, but I have to give you some airtime on this one because this is kind of cool. This is new.
There are some familiar names on in this category for me. Quick shout out to Rome to Rio, which I just think is a great tool for planning. And obviously that gives you the ability to look at options like a train instead of flying. I'll pick Africa Rally. So Africa Rally is a charity road trip. It's 4,500 kilometers. You start in South Africa and you end in Kenya. Part of the incentive here is the organizers incentivize you by driving the oldest, worst, or most ridiculous vehicle for this event. And I think the way you look at it, any holiday, any trip, any exploration is great. You can fly from point A to point B, or you can drive there. And I think when you drive there, I mean, this also touches on dispersed tourism, meaning you're flying from capital A to capital B. If you're doing this rally, and I have done some of these, if you look behind me, actually, is a map of India, and I drove a tuk-tuk for 2,000 kilometers from Mumbai to Chennai. So my point being is you're not stopping in every big city, you're stopping in the smallest of villages. And I can tell you some of my most meaningful and genuine interactions on my road trip in India, which of course could be very similar to those in Africa, was simply stopping at a gas station and ending up spending 20 minutes talking with the attendants, other people filling up. So yeah, I think slow travel, dispersed travel, and these genuine interactions that you'll end up having by the simple fact that you are going in a slow fashion.
Can you tell a little bit about Untours?
Untours are actually the world's first B Corp. So if you're familiar with benefit corporations, they were the first. But they're a travel company actually founded in the 1970s. And it's kind of amazing that their business model hasn't really changed that much, which is they take people from America and put them in villages in Europe. But rather than driving them around on a trip, they stay in that village for a week or 2 weeks. And I guess the concept is that you can become more of a local. So they'll give you a guide, will show you around, but they'll give you your train pass, help you settle in. That's been their business model. And it's interesting that what's unique about Untours is that the Untours Foundation, which is a not-for-profit, actually owns the for-profit travel companies. So, which is a bit flipped. Most of the time, the for-profit owns the not-for-profit. So they've got a really interesting model there. We've worked with them to create what's called the Slow Travel Network on Travel Massive, where we're sharing more of these slow travel stories. So I think, Rick, it'd be great to have you on there to share some of your stories. But the idea, again, is if people are aware of this concept of slow travel and they can hear other people talk about it, suddenly they can think, okay, maybe I could do that. Maybe I don't need to just go on the bus tour and try to hit up every bucket list place in a whirlwind trip. I think what's interesting, though, there's a bit of a debate about slow travel, which is if you travel a long distance, are you still doing slow travel, or do you have to stay in the one place at the same time? So I think, I don't like to use this word, but I'd say slow travel could be more of a vibe, or part of it is a vibe. And I think the other interesting thing is that through slow travel, as Rick said, you're driving places, you're not flying places. You might have to fly to get there to do your slow travel, but where possible, you're using other forms of transport. So I think this is a really interesting space.
I'd like to point out, we picked up on Rome to Rio from Rick there, but just pick up Chrono Trains if you could for us, Ian. There's a very addictive, and I've been hypnotized by it while we've been talking. There's a wonderful animated GIF in the thumbnail here if you've been watching along on YouTube, but on their website itself, there's an incredible way of viewing how ground rail transport, in particular bus and coach, all of the different types of non-air travel work. And when you don't know Europe, if you're not from these parts, even I don't even know how to really get around Poland. I've never been, but Germany, maybe France, Spain, and Italy, places I've been, I kind of know. But if you don't know how to get from A to B, this is a great tool to start with. And things like this tool are quite important for that first level education. If you're ideating about a trip, it shows how accessible from a time perspective a journey can be. It's the ground transport equivalent of a route map for an airline. If you want to see where you can fly to from Dublin, you'll see a route map of all of the spider legs of the flights that go direct from Dublin Airport. You'll be able to see, oh, I can fly to Bremen, wherever. So all of those options are there, but for ground. And when you move around their interactive map, you can see in real time, well, nearly real time, you can see in real time if I'm leaving from Paris, where can I get to in 4 hours travel time. So assuming that you're at the stop 4 hours from now, you could be in, well, it's showing me London, most of Brittany, the south of France. There's quite a lot going there. So it shows that there's mobility options from a transport perspective right there and easy to access. And then obviously there's plenty of other content sites, including Rome to Rio, to get you a little bit more detail. So fair play to projects like this for making it easy to understand. I love the section we're coming to next. Africa has always been a topic that we've covered on Travel Massive. We gave one of our live shows during the pandemic to the growth in Africa, and the emergence of travel startups in Africa has been a recent topic on the Travel Massive platform. Ian, I love the time you give it. Is this because we see the communities at the grassroots level for Travel Massive meetups in all of the various capitals around the African continent? How are we so sensitive to it? Why do we give this more coverage than many other locations?
Good question. Well, 1 in 10 members of Travel Massive live in Africa. And as a tourism network, there are lots of tour operators in Africa. And what I've been seeing is sort of the digitization of travel. This thing is 2 layers. One is it's easy to book stuff in Africa and discover things, but it's also becoming easier for people in Africa to travel as well. So we picked out only a few. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But I think that, anyone that is interested in discovering more about, the tourism industry in Africa should definitely be connected with, say, Cape Town Travel Massive or Lagos Travel Massive community. There's lots of fantastic people in our community. I think they all deserve a shout out. And, there's been a few companies that have surfaced out of that I wanted to shine a spotlight on in this list.
Rick, any standouts for you in the Africa section here?
I wanted to point out African Travel Crew out of South Africa. If you're Googling around and you're like, oh, I'm thinking of going to Amsterdam, I mean, there's going to be 50 million data points on Amsterdam. And there's just simply not the same parallel when it comes to Africa. There's just not as much travel content at all comparatively to the well-touristed areas. So thanks to these guys here. They're just creating great content, mostly on South Africa on a regular basis, and inspiring and educating all of us who want to spread our wings a little bit and start exploring other areas around the globe.
I'll quickly jump in and let everyone know that Rick has been to 52 countries in Africa. I think you've got 2 left. So we're talking with someone who has really traveled across Africa. Rick, just let me indulge on a question for you is, in terms of growth in tourism, like what places in Africa are you seeing growth in travel?
I mean, this is anecdotal. I mean, the countries with the better infrastructure, the more development, more tourism infrastructure are a little better positioned. Those are going to be some of the familiar names of Kenya, Tanzania, Morocco, Egypt, and South Africa. But yeah, I mean, there really is endless, unlimited opportunity, tons of challenges, but great opportunity, just, sheer natural beauty, great unique cultures and traditions. And then going down 1 tier lower, a country like Namibia or Botswana. I just went to Madagascar, which is just stunning, but the infrastructure is so challenging. So yeah, you have that little catch-22.
Let's talk about the next 2 sections together. So we're about halfway through the list. The next 2 kind of feel like they belong together. We have technology solutions for affiliate marketing. That was a topic that was big, about 20 years ago. And the way you phrase it, Ian, only somebody that was active in this 20 years ago would know, because it's cool. Again, I like the title. But there's also a very empowering or very enabling grouping of companies next. The travel tech empowering travel creators. I think it makes for a great group of companies here. There's a few that I love and recognize already. What stands out in this technology section for you both? Maybe start with Rick.
Yeah, I think we all know a lot of travel content creators, AKA bloggers. And I mean, I would say over the last X years, 5 years, there's been a number of travel content creators who have segued into operating and offering their own tours. So I'll give a shout out to my friend Ian Ord of Where Sidewalks End. Wrote a very powerful, moving piece on getting a tribal tattoo in Thailand about 15 years ago. And this actually transitioned into a business of providing tattoos in Thailand for those people who wanted the same traditional experience. So in other words, so something like Indie Travel is a platform where locals have the ability to create and set up their own businesses, their own tourism businesses on these platforms. So, there's a lot of competitors in this space, but great to see another one here. But this is just a great opportunity to, reach out directly to the consumer and working with them and providing an authentic and genuine experience for those people who are visiting your country.
I'm going to give a shout out myself to Duffel. It's a team I've been following since their earliest days. The project that you've surfaced here, Ian, is their Duffel Links, which allows a content creator or a small tech company or a tangential tech company that just doesn't have time to go deep in travel to start monetizing content or monetizing product using Duffel Links. There's something quite powerful about how to do that. Is there anything that stands out for yourself, Ian?
So when I say that affiliate marketing is cool again, a third of Travel Massive members probably monetize through affiliate marketing on their blogs or content. But it's happened, I think, over the last few years is that, we have to admit a lot of the tools suck, right? And they're very clunky, and you have to have a lot of technical understanding of how to put links in and stuff. And so people like Travel Payouts or Stay22 or Safety Wing have come along and just made it a lot easier to put widgets on your website to become part of the affiliate program. They're also providing a lot of tools like resources and helping people and putting on webinars. And so there's a whole lot of knowledge sharing happening in that space. So, I think when I say affiliate marketing is cool again, I mean, it's cool again for a group of companies. There are a lot of companies that really realize that in order to capture the attention of content creators, they have to have really good platforms. So this is just a few, and I'm sure we'll probably be adding more to this list as time goes on.
Moving on to the next section, it's actually a name I recognize straight away, and I'll tell the story of the section through them. Questo were on the Travel Massive podcast a couple of years back, and the way that they created their content was to turn some digital into an entire physical experience as you wandered around a city using their digital content to guide you. And that's where the term gamification comes into your title, I think, Ian. So you turn cities into playgrounds. How can you use content, apps, web services, whatever you're building with, into something that makes a great travel experience the way you've shown it there? How did this surface for you? Questo's a great standout for me, but how did this surface for you? Was there just other apps that kept coming? Was this something that's been in the background or in the wings for a few years, just waiting to surface?
Yeah, well, I have a personal experience that during the lockdowns, we worked with Secret City Trails to develop gamified walks in Sydney, and that sort of first got me onto thinking about gamification. Urban Challenger, Daniel is one of the co-founders of that company, and he used this great term which I've kind of stolen for the description here, is that gamification gives people agency. The difference is if you are just on a self-guided tour from A to B, you might just get bored and deviate off the path. But as soon as you give people a challenge, it changes it. It makes it fun and exciting. And this concept of gamification, if you think about how popular the Pokemon Go was, for example, of getting people to explore. So tourism is also competing with computer games in some sense. So I think it's great that people are kind of enabling sightseeing through playing games. I played Questo in Germany when I was there last, and I had a lot of fun learning about Hamburg, and you just learn stuff that you would never really think of knowing.
Rick, any standouts for you here?
I think these games, quote unquote games, are a great catalyst to help you see more, explore more, and again, interact more. So I have a friend, and he is traveling to every country in the world, and he brings two things with him on every trip. And one is his kilt, and two is his bagpipe. So he bagpipes in every country he goes to. And guess what that does? That opens up so many doors. People are engaging, interacting with him. They want to talk to him. And he has experiences that virtually none of us will have.
Moving on to the next section where trip planning gains AI superpowers. Travel plans can get complicated, so how to keep track of everything? Trip planning apps are making a comeback with group sharing and AI-generated itineraries as a category, Ian. If somebody pitches you a trip planner, you know you're in danger territory, but these guys seem to have put something decent together, all of them. It's a tough space to start in, right?
It is, and just I guess the big challenge for trip planning for anyone listening is that people will use it once, they've gone their trip, and then, then there's a big gap in terms of when people will use it again, use your app again to do trip planning. Every year, people are launching apps and ideas in this space. I think what I've seen is that group travel, that's been something that we've seen. And then, of course, all of the ChatGPT style trip itinerary planners. In fact, I don't think we're accepting any more of these on Travel Massive because they all kind of are the same. But it was interesting how quickly people could spool up an itinerary planner with ChatGPT. So I still think that they're interesting and they provide value. I'd say the challenge obviously is, how these apps will monetize. But, the point of this list is we're not looking for an investor's lens with this list. We're looking at what people are creating and putting out there and what people are using. My pick here is Tripsy Travel Planner. Two guys behind this are razor sharp focused on beautiful design and usability. I think they were featured on the App Store a while back. I really love the look of it, so I'd recommend to check them out.
Rick, you've seen your fair share of travel planners, I'm sure. Is there any standouts in this list of 10?
Yeah, as someone who is dabbling with ChatGPT, I want to get some additional input. So when I'm visiting a new country, I might go to ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, I need a 5-day agenda for Lesotho. And it's a good starting point. I think with some of these apps or AIs here on this list, they have the opportunity to better the user experience. So something like Planet Earth gives a number of fields that you can input before it spits out the agenda. So in other words, most of us are not prompt engineers and are not experts at maybe working with ChatGPT, but for one of these AI companies who can create a great interface, who can create some inputs to help personalize and better the output of the AI, I think that will be a benefit to travelers.
The next section is almost as well. No, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I'm a map geek. Part of building a ground transport startup is that you get used to maps, either commercially or technically. You need to know your maps, and I'm still making my way through this list, Ian. I loved seeing things like Soundprint come out. The light pollution map is quite compelling too. I love that there's still a lot of space for contextual, almost micro interactions around geography and geospatial. There's quite a lot here. It's your biggest section. You've got 13 projects here. You tell me, what's your standout here and why did you make this section?
People are obviously building apps around specific bits of content, and travel lends itself to a map, right? So if you think about Beyond Angkor, which is one of the projects featured here, they're putting temples and abandoned ruins in Southeast Asia onto a map. So there's utility there with maps. But some of the interesting things that have come along, so we were talking about ChatGPT, one of them is called Text to Map. I think they're Berlin-based. What is interesting about this is that if you've ever tried to create a map you know how freaking hard it is to like put the map pins on and figure out where everything should go. What they do is you literally just write the text and it creates the map kind of automatically for you, which means that creators or people building things can just focus on the text, and then this piece of software will sort of automatically put all those things on a map. And it's a beautiful looking website as well. Really simple, really well done, really well executed. So I think that highlights some of the innovations that's sort of happening in mapping, not, going beyond just the standard UX of maps and more into like, how do we actually create maps and share maps?
The part of the problem with mapping is that the design language is kind of there. It's been defined. It's, take it from Google Maps. They all tend to look like a Google Map user experience. So it's about the quality of the interactions that you're having with the map content. After that means that there's, less room for user experience visually, but a lot more is based on the experience over time. So the more time you spend with these particular tools, the more value that you have to uncover. It's not something that you'll read straight away from your first glance at the product. It's overuse over time that you get a feeling for the quality of the experience. Rick, what's your pick here? There's a lot. And I've never seen your map. You visited a whole ton of countries. I bet you track them in weird and wacky ways, but what are your standouts here, and how do you take a look at a category like this?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us who love to travel, we also love to track and categorize and keep lists. And actually, one of the websites that I use a ton of the time is featured on this list here. That's Nomad Mania. So shout out to the founder, Harry Matsidzis, who has put in so much time and resources into creating this unbelievably great platform. I'm trying to visit every country in the world. There's 193 countries. Harry said, you know what? This is not a great mechanism for really seeing the world, 193. So he divided the world into 1,301 regions, and that would make you a much better, more rounded traveler. Now, there is some logic to this madness, meaning we spoke about slow travel. We spoke about gamification. All these at some level are a catalyst to create better interactions, to see more, to do more. So by having these regions, the 1,301 regions, you can click on that region and there will be a multiple of different lists. In other words, catalyst for you to see and do more. So Harry is, we'll use the word meticulous or maybe obsessive. So one of the lists are waterfalls. One of the lists are funiculars. One of them are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So again,
Brilliant.
These
it's a
are
checklist mechanism. It's a machine to give you a new list other than the 190, 192, 193. You've got the other things to look at. That's incredible. Okay, that's challenge accepted. Wow. So what drives you? We're coming into the micronations. You featured there, Rick. What drives you to visit 192 odd countries? Or are you just counting the best ones?
I'm counting them all. Some are better and more richer experiences than others. I think it's the simple concept, the simple idea of discovery, exploration, learning, wonderment, amazement, also combined with the satisfaction of completing a list. So I think those two things tied in together.
You feature in the Micronations on the Rise list here. We've got 4. We've got the Principality of Sealand, which is the first thing that came to my mind when the word micronation flashed on screen here. Let's Buy an Island, Counting Countries is there in Microcon Chicago. Give us a bit of context on this trend.
Yeah, to me, it's absolutely fascinating. I'm involved with all 4 of these here. In short, we just spoke about 193 countries. Those are UN recognized member states. Then we look at something like Nomad Mania, who says, oh, okay, you know what, that's not an effective benchmark of seeing the world. We're going to split it up into regions. And then we have micronations. And micronations encompasses a great range from the deadly serious to the comical. And micronations are in essence a de facto state or country simply by the founder simply saying, I have a country, it's my country. When you talk to micronations or microstates, it literally could be a 14-year-old's bedroom, and he drew a flag and he wrote out a constitution on his computer. But then we have something like Sealand, which you're showing, which was an abandoned World War II platform that shot down Nazi planes as it came down to attack England. An entrepreneurial veteran of World War II, Roy Paddy Bates, claimed this platform in the late 1960s. And shortly after that, he christened it the Principality of Sealand. And now they are on their third generation of royal families. You can see Prince Liam and Prince James there in the corner. Again, they have a national anthem. They have sporting teams in international sporting events representing the Principality of Sealand. I've been there. I'm really fortunate. I'm one of the few tourists that have been to Sealand. I got a passport stamp, Kevin.
I love it. Of course, they have a monarchy. They can do whatever they like. They
God bless them.
So
God bless the prince.
I got citizenship to the Principality of Islandia, this one here, for $20. This is a crowd-funded island off the coast of Belize that was purchased. So that's a sort of another example. I guess you're probably going to quiz us, Kevin, on like why this is a trend. I think micronations are really fun, and I got a full credit to Rick for really getting this on Travel Massive and making me exposed to this whole kind of subculture of travel. It's super interesting and makes you think about destinations in different ways. Makes you, some are, as Rick said, some are funny, some are more serious. They're kind of almost putting a mirror back to society, and it makes you think about your own country. And I think it's fun. So I think we should have something fun on the list.
Coming up to the last section here, impact travel. There's a few organizations I'm aware of, many that I've experienced, one I've worked with. There's some great benefit to changing our perspective on travel, in as much the way that we have accessible travel, or using travel a little bit differently. And would you say using travel, but being able to experience the world through different lenses? There's more going on here too. Can you talk about what brought this category to being, and what are the standouts for yourself, Ian?
So I think, this is a category, I guess, to finish it off, right? To finish the list off. But it's, we started with, I think, a very important one, which is accessible travel. I think impact travel is, we could have also started with impact travel, but I'd like to put it at the end so, people can scroll down to something that I think is really important and to think about, which is really this concept that travelers are now starting to really understand that their travel makes an impact. And look, we're going to keep traveling. I don't think we can stop people from traveling. But what we can do is make people think about the impact that they have when they travel. And, when you travel, you can make a decision. You're making lots of decisions and choices when you travel. And so if as travelers, we can make better decisions, more informed decisions that can make less of an impact on the environment, make more positive impact in the places that we go to, then I think that makes travel better. And so this idea of impact travel becoming mainstream. One example is a documentary here at the top called The Last Tourist, which was commissioned by G Adventures, one of the world's largest travel adventure companies, literally funded a documentary about mass tourism and how, mass tourism can have lasting damage on communities. So I think travel companies taking ownership of the problem, not just saying it's not us, it's governments or whatever, or you need to be regulators. It is great to see the tourism industry itself recognize some of the issues challenges, and to also then inform travelers so that they can make better decisions. So this is sort of what this category is all about.
Rick, this one to you. What does impact travel mean to you? And what have you seen?
Well, what I was going to talk about as well was The Last Tourist. So there are three themes in there, which are really, I mean, they're quite self-evident, but I think sometimes when we travel, we forget about these themes and, hey, we're on holiday or we're over here, we're not at home. So the theme number one is animals are not entertainment. And we have to think about, I mean, it's so stereotypical. You go to Thailand, you ride an elephant, but the reality is these elephants are tortured. They are beaten to be our quote unquote entertainment. So instead of riding that elephant, go to the elephant orphanage or simply the park where you're able to view the elephant in nature. Second one is, again, really obvious when you even think about it for one split second. Treat children how you would treat children back at home. In other words, when you're in Dublin, you don't run off to a school and see a cute 5-year-old, pick him up, hold him, give him candy, start taking photos. You would either get beat up or arrested. And there's nothing malicious in what these people are doing. But I mean, we do this over and over. You see a cute kid on the street. Maybe it's a developing country. You give them a little piece of candy. You take a little selfie with them. So treat children how you treat children. And then Ian touched on this one a little bit. And we've spoken about this, I think, throughout our entire conversation. It's get out of the bubble and get the money into the community. I mean, I think the two biggest, I don't want to say criminals, but there's cruises and there's the 5-star inclusive resort. So these end up being like economic bubbles and capture all of the money and send it back to the home country. So go stay in that homestay, go hire a local guide, eat at the local food stand, get your money circulating within the community, support the locals, help them. And be very careful of how you spend your money. So I think three pretty evident themes when you even think about it for 1 minute, but The Last Tourist, I mean, makes a really strong argument that we need to be a little bit more aware and remember these themes when you're out traveling.
We're going to have to promote that a little bit with some upvotes, Ian. I'd like to get more eyes on that, but there's some great projects here. And the second time in our conversation today, we heard the term B Corp. A growing number of B Corps are bringing greater accountability and awareness to the tourism sector. It's actually a rigorous process to get through the B Corp certification. So it's great to have that lens to be able to bring some sort of equality mark to different travel activities that you can then trade on. So it brings some commercial upside, but it's great to have that lens to rate projects and other travel corporations by. We're at the end of the list. You've put probably the most important one last, maybe. There's some great things for us to discover and explore in the 100 odd projects that are here. And in fairness to you, Ian and Maria as well, when you were compiling this list, there are some breakout new topics in those categories. The trends themselves, you've said it before, they could fill a conference. Is there, in your view, another trend on the horizon for the future, or is there something you'd like to see more of as a trend surfacing naturally in the Travel Massive platform?
I think that I love seeing startups that are small, that are someone's had an idea and they've had the capability to develop it. I love seeing that, and certainly you can see the strength in the number of startups that are on this list. And not all of them are venture capital funded with 50 developers. A lot of these ideas can be created by one person. So I think my thing is I love to showcase projects that people are, say, working on individually, or in pairs. And it's not always about the big companies. And you on this list, you'll see small and big companies all mixed up. But, I'm really interested in people with ideas, that want to change travel. And, this proves that you don't have to have $100 million of venture capital to change travel. You can be one person with one idea and some time on your hands to build something that can change the world, literally. So I'd like to see more of that stuff.
Rick, the same question to you. Is there a category or a trend you'd like to see more of? And be selfish or be altruistic or be hopeful, but is there a trend you'd like to see more of and more projects emerging in?
To me, I love all these categories. Whether it's the micronations or the mapping, I personally am fascinated with those as a traveler myself. Bigger picture, we need to make travel sustainable, right? And we need to make it be a force for good. So if we want this to continue, we want people to have the opportunity to fly around the world. We need these entrepreneurs. We need these startups to address all of these massive challenges of the negative consequences that travel bring, while reinforcing all of the positive and great things that travel can do as well. So I think that's the takeaway. We have to thank the entrepreneurs who are solving the problems in the travel space.
We want the experiences that future generations have in any destination to be as wonderful or as magical as we had in that same destination generations before them. So that is a really large challenge. How do you make it as incredible? How do you make travel as compelling for future generations? It's by keeping it sustainable. Ian, that was one hell of a body of work you've put together. Thank you for doing this. I love the title. It's What's Hot in Travel in 2023. And it's also what you haven't heard of in travel in 2023. You might find some familiar projects. You might find things that should be there, in which case, head on over to travelmassive.com, enter the project if you're the project runner. Make sure it's well documented and well detailed. Add the images, the visuals, the content to help boost and promote it, and let the community surface it to these are new categories in the future. But Ian, thank you so much for putting this together. What's Hot in Travel 2023. Let there be one in 2024 and beyond as well. But it's with the work of the community that we're able to produce a podcast like this to reflect on the 100 great projects that we've found through the platform. Power to you.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, Rick. I appreciate your time. And it's been great to talk about these trends and projects with you guys.
The Travel Massive Podcast. TravelMassive.com.